here's the point where you are establishing a new idea in your writing. That makes a new paragraph. Here's how you organize your paragraphs. And then, next week we're going to edit this. And suddenly this, writing process is revealed that you can't just create a single draft and expect it to be good, but that there's a process and it has steps. And those steps take...
Engineering class at elementary school, how do you guys manage that? And what does it look like? Does it look like robotics? Does it look like coding? Does it look like AI? I mean, there's so many different ideas that comes to my mind. And how does it work?
Of what it means to educate a person properly. But there's a lot of good research that indicates that, the constant drip of dopamine.
Do you do professional development for them? If a new teacher joins in who needs to understand what, say, classroom journal looks like and what are the ways to follow different other practices in the class? Welcome to the podcast. We tell kids to pay attention and get organized, but those aren't character traits. They're skills that can be taught. Today, we are unpacking executive functioning, working memory, cognitive flexibility, self-control, fixed and growth mindset, and how schools can build it from the earliest grades. Our guest is Josiah Wagoner, head of school at Basis Independent. Josiah, welcome here.
Thank you so much for having me.
We would love to start from your journey of being a teacher to program manager, working in different edtech companies, being the head of school, from South Korea to the Bay Area, and the whole journey within. Sounds super exciting.
Yeah, well, it's been an interesting journey. I spent my 20s really dedicated to one thing, and that is gaining as much experience in as many areas of the education industry as I could. And, for the first part, that was, international education, English as a second language. I taught high school, I taught elementary, I did university teacher training programs, I worked in publishing. And from that experience, it was really revealed to me that elementary education is my passion. That's the right place for me. I feel like I have an understanding of the students and their developmental stage better than I do in other areas. And that led me to Basis Independent Fremont, here in Fremont, California, where I work now. I started as a teacher, and then worked my way up through administration. I had great mentors. Dr. Ashley Leba and Mr. Toby Walker have been great mentors to me. And now this is my 5th year as the head of school for our elementary age program.
I mean, 5 years, and also the overall idea of taking it from how did you realize that elementary is what works versus, say, high school? Because there's two different student categories, and I used to teach high school maths. So I come from a background of understanding how that works.
Yeah.
They're teenagers and they're 16-year-old and 17-year-old versus someone who's still very young and I think more full of energy, creative.
Yeah, to me, there's a difference in what the students need. And just like any industry, ours is a service industry. And just like any service industry, we need to be paired with the customers who need our skills the best. And it just so happens that for me, my understanding of what elementary age students need is stronger than my understanding of middle school or high school. And so that has really become a passionate area for me. And I'm very fortunate to find myself in the right place, running an elementary school.
I think it's time that we also come down to executive functioning because it's a buzzword. It's something which is thrown around so much, specifically for our elementary kids. So if you're looking at a high performing school, which is what BASIS is, what does the term actually mean to you? And why is it so foundational to the whole academic programming that you guys do and even the curriculum building?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, there, just like any industry, there's a lot of buzzwords about this and that, and, it's used for various purposes. And there's often a difference between what parents understand it to mean and what school staff and perhaps students understand it to mean. For executive functioning, this includes a variety of skills. And anyone who wants to dig into this a little bit deeper, I recommend the research of Dawson and Guerre, who really break this down into 12 foundational skills under the umbrella of executive functioning. But to summarize quickly, it includes planning, time management, the ability to sustain attention, regulate emotions, be flexible, manage stress, and then to physically be organized in your space. So where a student may excel at content knowledge, if they're not excelling in executive functioning, then their grades may suffer, their confidence may suffer, their motivation may suffer. So it's really two halves of a whole that work together to determine student success.
The fact that you mentioned the two halves, right? Like, and I think it also comes with the misconception because a lot of people have, and parents specifically, because there's so much knowledge out there right now on Instagram and TikTok, and everyone have their own voice that they don't really understand completely what the child's executive function skills are. So, what do you think the biggest single misconception is?
I would say the biggest misconception is the idea that it will just happen. It one day it will click and they'll be able to manage their time. One day it'll click and they'll understand why they need to organize and clean the room. And that's simply not the case. As with any skill in education, it needs to be directly taught. It needs to be directly practiced. Teachers need to model for students how to chunk a large project into smaller manageable pieces, how to record their assignments in a planner so that they don't lose track of things or they're not surprised by a deadlines. These routines and systems have to be practiced. There's a great study out of the Center of the Developing Child at Harvard that sums up really well why this matters, especially early. It's a little bit of an older study. It's from 2011, but they investigated a great question of when the most executive functioning skill growth occurs. And they found that most executive functioning development happens before the age of 15.
Oh, wow.
And if you draw a line from when school begins at 4 years old to that 15 age where the plateau begins, half of that time is spent in elementary school. And so if we are going to properly foster executive functioning skills in the students that we're responsible for, we can't just ignore it for their entire primary years.
It also reminds me of Sir Ken Robinson. I'm not sure if you've the most famous TED Talk, which is there on internet. It's
Yeah, I've seen a few, but remind me of Robinson.
it's one of those ones which I think it broke the internet because he started with how schools kill creativity, and it started.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's like one of the first things that came out, and I think it's got like 100 million views or even beyond that. In one of the things which he mentions over and over again is the fact that there needs to be structure and not structure. Like it needs to be a good combination of how do we do things because the reasons why schools were formed and the reasons why schools exist are two different things. And what we expect out of schools have also changed. And it's something which always comes to me, right? And the fact that you mentioned the Harvard study, because I read it, and it says these skills come in at before age 15. And the reason for that is we already start forming our habits. We start mimicking the patterns of our adults around us, and we start thinking what's already happening everywhere. So if we do not cater to it at the younger age, where we choose something and do something about it, it does not translate later.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, it's incredibly important. I mean, I speak in terms of teachers, but parents are a form of teachers, and it's important for all of the adults around a child to be modeling these things. Something that I've seen happen that I'm not a fan of is kind of the process of parenting being happening behind closed doors.
yeah,
And any parent out there listening is going to know, okay, this thing, soccer practice starts in an hour, but I need to drive to the store and pick up the milk, and then I need to drive to the field, but changing clothes takes 10 minutes. And so that type of planning and time budgeting, don't hide that behind the screen and then tell your child we need to leave an hour before practice starts. Do it in front of them. Narrate, here's how I arrived at this conclusion. Here's how I plan your life so that you can be successful. That type of modeling leads to kids who can do the same thing.
I think even what you said, there's something else that the parents can add is giving it a choice. When they plan it out, they generally have one or two things which can be shifted around, and providing that choice to the kid would make them more happy to decide if they want to play right now or versus doing homework versus,
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
it's
that's an excellent point, because maybe you can pick up the milk after practice, but then there's less time for dinner, and you can let the child have some agency in that decision. If it matches your family's plan.
And that's, I think, yeah, absolutely. And this, because you mentioned teachers, right? Because I mean, you have more control over teachers versus parents. So, what's the most powerful, non-obvious ritual kind of a thing or routine that you've built out that helps to get this muscle going?
Yeah. So specifically here at Basis Independent, something that we do, we call it a CJ. It's the communication journal. It's a fancy name for a planner. And we, from the first day of transitional kindergarten, they're using a planner. They're writing, English class, and then they write what they do. And if there's homework, then they write that down. And so we build this habit of them recording what they've done in their day and the things that they're responsible for. And they may not have their first piece of homework until 2 years later in first grade, but by the time they're responsible for homework, now they have the system in place in order to keep track of it and succeed at it. And then parents get to see that too. They say, well, what's your homework? And we'll say, don't ask me, look at the CJ. What does your child say their homework is? What does the record indicate? So that has been a useful tool. We also do engineering class. Engineering, by its very nature, it's a process oriented discipline, and so our students, again, from the first day of transitional kindergarten all the way up through the end of elementary school, they have engineering, and that is they're designing projects, they're testing results, they're following budgets, they're collaborating with peers. Every project that they complete is just steeped in executive functioning expectations.
This is lovely, and I would want to dive a little more deep. Engineering class at elementary school, how do you guys
Yeah.
manage that? And what does it look like? Does it look like robotics? Does it look like coding? Does it look like AI? I mean, there's so many different ideas that comes to my mind. And how does
Yeah.
it work?
Well, and you've really kind of hit the challenge right on the head, is that there's a lot of different types of engineering. And so we do try to tackle as many of those as we can. We want students to explore as much as they possibly can during these formative years. It does involve coding, it does involve computer skills, simple machines, ramps and levers. And then there's also the process of thinking like an engineer. Here's a question, here's a challenge. How do I follow a process that will lead to a solution that I can test? And then when that solution fails, how can I adapt my design? How can I adapt my plan in response to the new piece of information that I have from my failed test? So part of it is thinking like an engineer. Part of it is just really fun projects of, blowing a fan at a car with a windmill on the back. And then of course there's the real world skills of coding. We do incorporate AI, especially in the past couple of years. We do some 3D modeling with AutoCAD, 3D printers, stuff like that. We try to make it really fun, but it's always project based, and try to keep it on the edge of what's exciting in the field.
That makes sense because engineering is extremely vast. And I also get the
Yeah.
executive functioning, right? Like tying this together. Not everyone's thought of doing both of those things at the same moment of time. So that's commendable. So, so how do you look at from teachers' viewpoints? Do you specifically at elementary level, right? Like most of the teachers, do you do professional development for them? If a new teacher joins in who needs to understand what, say, classroom journal looks like and what are the ways to follow different other practices in the class? Or do you also have it in almost like a kindergarten maths teacher would do it in a different manner? Or how do you look at it?
Yeah, I mean, the differences in age tend to be largely related to expectations. What you can expect a kindergartner to be capable of would be different than what you would expect from a third grader. But the process of instructing executive functioning is not substantially different, and the purpose is always the same. So if you have a second grade class and they're working on paragraphing, you would be teaching the students to identify, here's the point where you are establishing a new idea in your writing that makes a new paragraph. Here's how you organize your paragraphs. And then, next week we're going to edit this. And suddenly this, writing process is revealed that you can't just create a single draft and expect it to be good, but that there's a process and it has steps, and those steps take place over multiple days. So I, I think that a lot of the training that we do focuses on helping teachers to, first of all, maintain the expectations that students do these things themselves.
Yeah.
Second, that when EF skills are required, that we're teaching students how to do it. Writing on the board, hey, your test is 5 days from now. How are you spending the 4 days before you get there? Which units are you studying? Which lessons are you going to review? Because not every student who has a test 5 days from now is going to study for 4 days. Some of them are going to study for one, and that's poor planning.
Yeah.
And it's especially poor planning if the teacher didn't talk to them about that process ahead of time.
Yeah, I think so. I think processes makes a lot of sense. And even talking about that, because almost all of us are lazy by nature. That's how I say it. Like, and if the chance for us to be a little bit more lazy, we would all be. It's not uh, it's not inherent to do hard things first.
Yeah.
So one of the things that happens, right? Like, and I'm going to come towards the digital distraction piece because
Mm.
there's a lot of noise which is coming in via laptops. Can we ban screens? Can we do something else specifically for the elementary school? What do you think about it? Do you think it affects CF? Do you think it needs to be done?
This is such an interesting catch-22 in our modern world because many of the skills that we need young people to have are related to they're digital in some way. They're related to technology. I think about AI and the way it's disrupting education. I mean, it's disrupting every industry, but it's something that we have to think about in education. We can't just ignore that and pretend it doesn't exist because it happens on a screen, right? We need to integrate that into our model of what it means to educate a person properly. But there's a lot of good research that indicates that the constant drip of dopamine, especially through digital sources, is not a good thing for development. Um, so as an educational institution that really prides itself on adapting quickly and kind of being like a startup among education, that's an interesting tug of war because on one hand, we avoid technology in the ways that it disrupts. I'll give you an example. We do not deliver grades to parents by email. We do not make them available on a portal that parents can access. We print midterm grades and end of term grades and hand them to the student. and then they take them home. And it creates this organic opportunity for a student and a parent to have a conversation about how they're doing. It's their education. Why would we create a process that leaves them out of it? And also, the easiest way to deliver grades is by email. And so, we've made a conscious choice to avoid something digital and convenient in favor of the way that it forces the child to be involved in their own education. And at the same time, we also have an AI policy of, okay, how can we help students to interact with AI in a way that is going to prepare them to enter the workforce in X number of years?
And this is what I'm going to delve a little bit more into because most schools haven't built that policy out yet. How was the policy building process for you? Did you guys do what tools do you guys use? What grades do you start at? I'm guessing it's third grade and above, or maybe even younger. How do you look at it? Uh, how are you seeing it? And even the data privacy, like the overarching question of the data privacy, because uh, my biggest concern of AI is the fact that I think the ChatGPT report came out, which said in last year, the maximum amount of use case was for therapy. And I don't think, amongst everything else,
Yeah.
I don't think ChatGPT or any of the LLMs can be used for therapy. I think it can be supportive, but it also panders to you and it needs to
Yeah.
understand.
Yeah.
It panders to whatever we say. It is a very good friend in that way, but it
It's very affirming. Yeah. It's so interesting that you ask about AI in the context of executive functioning, because I think that something that it's very good for in an educational setting is the brainstorming, the planning, the conversation with ChatGPT that says, here's my idea, help me organize this. That's quite helpful. And to me, that does not cross the line into academic dishonesty. And I think that's often the fear among educators, is that this is academically dishonest. Um, but we need to set limits on it. If 30 years ago we had said, no, we're going to prevent word processing from entering educational settings because of spell check, that would have been horribly misguided. We would have a generation of workers who who don't know how to use word processing because they weren't brought up with it. But we didn't do that. And now the opposite is true. We have a generation of workers for whom word processing is second nature. So I think we need to be careful about, banning AI, but I do think we need to draw a line. Generative AI writing in place of student writing is not a good idea. But it's an excellent brainstorming and organizing tool.
Have you guys done any professional development for teachers for the same? Are the teachers well aware? Because something which we've been working on, and it's something that we do, is that we've been thinking about how assessment has to look like. Because
Yeah,
you can't have what used to be the previous way of assessment when ChatGPT is going to give out an answer within a minute, and every kid at home might have an access to a laptop or a phone or something, which they might not even, and it could just be their school laptop and they could be using it. So
right.
assessment needs to change. So have you guys worked with your teachers to understand that and like provide them with the right tools?
Yeah, absolutely. And our solution has actually been relatively simple and straightforward, and that is students write with a pencil on paper. And as an elementary school, we go up to fifth grade, right? So partially the setting that I am in helps to allow that policy to exist. That they do their, if they're doing a writing project and they need to research something, they can use school laptops to Google something, or they can even ask an AI. They can ask Claude or ChatGPT or whoever, and that's a great tool for research. But we're going to know if they generate the writing, because the first draft was done in pencil on a piece of paper, and then the teacher read it, and then suddenly the second draft looks totally different and is perfect. Okay, that's pretty easy to distinguish. So by keeping students on pencil and paper, we've kind of circumvented that problem for now. We'll see where the technology goes.
And I'm going to pause here and I'm going to bring something different coming completely because
Yeah,
EF and emotional regulation also kind of go hand in hand.
yeah.
Sometimes when you manage your time and manage your functioning skills, you also understand your emotions better and you can place them better because you know what's coming. There's less uncertainty in everything. So, what do you think of the same? And how do you support one versus the other? Do you have something for emotional regulation and support too?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely have a separate kind of social emotional curriculum, and executive functioning is under that. Um, but yeah, the relationship between executive function and emotional control, emotional regulation is quite strong. And you kind of hit the nail on the head, right? So when a child feels some overwhelming emotion, it's often because something unexpected has happened. A friend that I expected to be kind is suddenly being unkind. A challenge I wasn't anticipating is suddenly in front of me and I need to act. So, of course, negative emotions emerge, but helping them with EF skills can dramatically improve their emotional resilience because they begin to know that they can fall back on their problem solving skills. They can fall back on their planning skills. They have practiced a similar situation in a low stakes environment. And now that it feels high stakes, whether it is or isn't, it feels high stakes. I can fall back on these things that I've practiced. So if you think about really good leaders who handle a crisis well, oftentimes they have practiced handling a crisis, and they have a process in place where they're surrounded by people who are good at planning, and those things together allow them to remain calm and lead through a crisis because they know that it's possible. They've done it before. There's a plan in place. Um, and so their emotional response tends to be more controlled because they're ready.
Yeah.
And we see the same thing in students that we've prepared with EF skills.
So, have you guys developed this curriculum in-house or have you guys bought something out which works for you in terms of social emotional learning and EF skills?
Yeah, so Basis Independent, our curriculum is proprietary. So the two pieces you're asking about, the social emotional learning and executive functioning, are developed in house. I had a large hand in that, and it's important that it be integrated into the academic content. So if you're expecting students to work with a group member, but you don't talk about the right way to give feedback and take feedback with a partner, then it's going to be it's not going to work so well. So it has to be integrated into the academic content.
I 100% agree with that. I don't think so you can take one without the other, or
Yeah.
it has to be done in a manner where everyone understands what's happening and where it's happening, even if done differently. Wow, I didn't even realize how much time it just went by. But before we end this, right, like, and there's one
Yeah.
very important thing that we end up doing is we ask the previous podcaster to give us a question for the next one.
Oh,
So
wow. Okay.
it's something that has been on for like 20 episodes now. So what is something that needs to change? Like the person asked this question, what is something that needs to change in education immediately? And there could be 10 different things that comes to your mind. What's the number one priority that you would want it to be?
Wow. That is a fantastic question. And I'm going to cheat and I'm going to give an answer that is for both teachers, but also for parents. And I think just in the care of young people now, we need to stop rescuing them so quickly. Um, when a child forgets their homework or they go over time because they didn't manage it well, the instinct, the protective instinct of educators and parents is to protect them from this uncomfortable feeling of their consequences, to step in and spare them from the discomfort of their mistake. And that robs them of that learning moment. A child being uncomfortable is uncomfortable, but it doesn't mean that it's wrong, and it doesn't mean that they're being harmed. It means that they're experiencing an opportunity to grow in some way. And when I talk to parents at the school, I often encourage them to let natural consequences play out instead of coaching their child through a thing. I think about, very early childhood, learning to buckle and unbuckle from a car seat. There's an element of strength that is required, right? But as soon as the child is strong enough to squeeze the latch, that is the moment where they should be responsible for buckling and unbuckling themselves. But I know for me, I felt like, oh, well, we just got to the store and I'm feeling impatient. I just want to go in the store. So I would get in and I would unbuckle because it's faster and it's convenient. And to watch them struggle is uncomfortable as a parent or as an educator. But if they don't learn to do it, I'll be doing it for them forever.
Yeah.
And eventually they're going to grow up and they're going to turn 18 and they're going to need to navigate the real world without me and without their teachers and without their other trusted adults. They need to make good decisions on their own. And if they haven't had practice until that moment, they're in trouble.
Wow, that's so powerful. And I think now that you've said it, I can see all the parents around me where they wouldn't be where they don't even realize that they're doing this. It's like
Yeah.
unconscious. So bringing out in front, oh wow, it's extremely powerful.
And now do I have to think of a question to give the next person?
Absolutely. But we will do this offline.
Well, I don't want to be the one who ruins the tradition.
All right, let me first end this. Thank you so much for doing this with us. It has been an absolute pleasure to host you. It was wonderful. Your insights are so valuable, specifically from how you think about it versus how you deliver it and just combining it academically. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure talking with you.
Thanks for tuning in. For more information about TomoClub, visit TomoClub or follow us on our socials. Stay curious, keep learning.